Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I'm your host, Cliff Garner, and, it's been a couple days since I've been on. I was a bit busy because of the election. We had our elections for local and municipal offices here in the U.S., or at least in the state of Illinois, and I'm a registrar, so I was needed to go in and do registrations. There were quite a few of them, actually, considering the lower turnout for this election. And Illinois is trying to remove some of the dead people from the rolls. So I was a little busier this time around and had a little extra to do with my duties. Pretty interesting though, on how they're figuring it out and how to take care of that. So little by little, we'll have a cleaner Illinois elections. We hope. There are a lot of ways that they've cheated over here in Illinois. This is common knowledge. And for people who say the dead do not vote in Illinois, those people are actually clearly lying or are terribly ignorant. One of the two. So, at any rate, there's a lot of different things that I'm wanting to get around to, but there's something that really bothers me about this gas attack. I saw this before when I was living in Turkey. And it's come back again. And I've got a couple things I want to read here to help you see that maybe things are not as clear as they might like. And first of all, I have this article from today, actually, in the Daily Caller. It's in their politics section. The article by Christian Datok, D-A-T-O-C, Datok, I don't know, something. But very, very nice, simple little article here. It's called False Flag. Ron Paul says Syrian chemical attack makes no sense. I will have it in the notes underneath. And here we go. And it's dated today, 3:50 p.m. Ron Paul claimed on Wednesday's broadcast of the Liberty Report that all signs point toward a Tuesday's chemical attack in Syria as being a false flag operation. Before this episode of possible gas exposure and who did what, things were going along reasonably well for the conditions, the former Texas congressman stated. Trump said, let the Syrians decide who should run their country, and peace talks were making out, and al-Qaeda and ISIS were on the run. It looks like, quote, it looks like maybe somebody didn't like that, so there had to be an episode, and the blame now is we cannot let that happen because it looks like it might benefit Assad, end quote. Another quote here. It's not so easy, though, is it? What happened 4 years ago in 2013, this whole thing about crossing the red line he posed. All right, end quote. Quote, ever since then, the neocons have been yelling and screaming. A part of the administration has been yelling and screaming about Assad using poison gas, end quote. It was never proven as fact, agreed Ron Paul, Institute for Peace and Prosperity Executive Director Daniel McAdams says. UN official Carla Del Ponte said it was most likely done by the rebels. And that is a quote. End quote. It makes no sense even if you were totally separate from this and take no sides in this and you were just an analyst. It doesn't make sense for Assad under these conditions to all of a sudden use poison gases, Paul continued. I think it's zero chance that he would have done this deliberately. And that's the end of the quote. Back in January, Paul said in an interview, the Daily Caller, that the false flag attacks could be used by both the so-called American deep state and foreign actors to draw the Trump administration into foreign engagements. I thought I was going to say entanglements, but different word here. Quote, all we need is a false flag and an accident, and everybody will be teaching them a lesson, he told the DC's Alex Pfeiffer. Quote, you know, the deep state is very powerful and they have a lot of control. I think there's the shadow government, the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and all the things that can be done just because they just melt away and do exactly what the establishment says. And I remember that false flag very well in Turkey. Again, I've said on this program recently even that I think that was one of the best moves that Obama did, was not jumping into the war when Turkey did the false flag attack in Syria, trying to drag us in and claim that the red line was crossed. That was one of the best moves he made. However, there were other deals that were made, and a lot of this was due to the policies that were being pursued by Hillary Clinton, and not to mention the money she was making. So this whole policy was a fiasco, and even Obama admits the worst thing that happened was what went down in Libya. That was Hillary Clinton. She made a ton of money out of that. There were arms that were shipped into Iskenderun, which is in Turkey. I went there, actually not long before the attack that went down in Benghazi. There were a lot of other things that pertain to that issue that I'll eventually get around to talking to. I actually made a recording of that in my memories about that. I was going to put on, but there were a couple of things I didn't like about the way it came out. And that was just a couple days ago. I remember it very well. Now, that's the article of the Daily Caller. I also found another article, and this is from 2015, and it's talking about the another possible false flag. And this is on counterpunch.org. I'm not too familiar with them, but I think they are actually bipartisan as a magazine or online magazine. This is dated October 23rd, 2015, and it's by Peter Lee. I'm not familiar with him, but that's fine. Hirsch vindicated. Turkish whistleblowers corroborate story on false flag sarin attack in Syria. This is quite the bombshell delivered by two CHP deputies in the Turkish parliament and reported by Today's Zaman, one of the top dailies in Turkey. Today's Zaman has been nationalized by the Erdogan government because the associations with Fethullah Gulen, and they are claiming that that Zaman was the organ of a terrorist organization trying to overthrow the government of Turkey. This has been part of the nonsense that Mr. Erdogan has perpetrated upon the Turkish people for a long time now, and he's using this to consolidate power and take over Turkey as a sole ruler. The man is a tyrant. Period. But this was in Zaman. You will not be able to find Zaman online any longer. It has been removed. It has been taken over by the Erdogan government, given to his cronies, and now it is an organ of Erdogan's. Lovely. But at any rate, this has been a process that's been going on for some time. You'll probably be able to find some of this material in archives and in similar type places. The fact is that this has been going on for a while now, and this particular attack was investigated, and it was a whitewash to make Erdogan look better than he actually is. It was to keep him from being looked down upon as a malefactor. That was part of the Obama's administration's policy, was to keep Erdogan from going down. He was originally an example of what supposedly a democratic Muslim government looked like. Mr. Erdogan has been tearing that down ever since. He was at one point actually pretty darn good, and there were some things that he did that are still good. The healthcare system there is probably the best I've heard about. I don't easily give that to him. That's very begrudging after a lot of the things he's done. But it's true, and he did a good job in that. He did a good job on a few other things. Before he pushed Ali Babajan out of the party, he did a lot of good things economically. But he's undoing all that. He's believing the people whispering in his ear that he is the Imam Mahdi, and that he will bring about the apocalypse. And he will do so by invading Jerusalem. What you are not being told, people, what you are not being told could very well kill you. So back to this article. I just barely started it. This is quite the bomb. Repeat again. This is the bombshell delivered by two CHP or CHP deputies in the Turkish parliament, reported by today's Zaman, one of the top dailies in Turkey. The CHP or CHP, they are the Social Democrats. There are two parties that consider themselves Kemalist, which is just to say that they believe they uphold the Ataturk legacy. The MHP, the MHP, is the other one. That's the nationalist wing. They're pan-Turkic. The CHP are Social Democrats. And basically the Kemalist groups split left and right. The one's nationalist, and the other one is Social Democrat. These are the Social Democrats. It supports the Seymour Hersh is reporting that the notorious sarin attack at Ghouta was a false attack orchestrated by Turkish intelligence in order to cross President Obama's chemical weapons red line and draw the United States into the Syria war to topple Assad. If so, President Obama deserves credit for holding the line. And now, I gave him credit, personally. I think it was one of the best things he did in foreign policy. Was not going in. Instead, he sent some of our troops into Mali, which he didn't tell you. And he got very busy in Africa, which he didn't tell you. Those were not as good. But he did keep us out of Syria. And for a lot of reasons. And the main one is because the Russians moved their troops in at that point. And Erdogan wanted us in there to fight him, to do his dirty work so that he could overrun the region, take it over, and there were a couple pipelines involved too, by the way. It involved a lot of money going into Turkey for him to just scoop off the top. The man's a billionaire, people. He's become incredibly wealthy since he has taken over Turkey. Incredibly wealthy. Daddy, what do I do with all the money in the shoe boxes? If so, President Obama deserves credit for holding the line against the attack despite the grumbling and incitement of the Syria hawks at home and abroad. Yeah, gee, thanks, neocons, Mr. McCain, Mr. Schumer, the neo-libs, Hillary Clinton, and warmonger Obama. Even he had better sense than to go in there at that time. Has he changed his mind now? And if you have, Mr. Obama, you have no right to influence the policy here in the United States any longer. Sit down and shut up. It's time for you to take up golf. And it also presents the unsavory picture of an al-Qaeda operative colluding with an ISIL in a war crime that killed 1,300 civilians. You heard that. 1,300 civilians. Al-Qaeda? Oh yeah, that's al-Nusra. ISIS? That was al-Qaeda in Iraq. A rival and at one point collaborator. That was al-Zarqawi's group. I find the report credible, taking into full account the fact that the CHP, Erdogan's center-left Kemalist rivals, and today's Zaman, whose editor-in-chief, Bülent Kenes, was recently detained on live TV for insulting Erdogan in a tweet. It's probably worse than that now. They are both on the outs with Erdogan. Considering the furious reaction it can be expected to elicit from Erdogan and the Turkish government, as a matter of fact, you've never heard any more about this. The temerity of the CHP and today's Zaman is running with this story as a sign of how desperate their struggle against Erdogan has become. This was before the so-called rebellion. Note that the author is shown only as columnist today's Zaman. I expect that the anti-Erdogan forces will hope this will be a game changer in terms of U.S. and European support for Erdogan. It will be very interesting to see if and how the media in the U.S. covers this story. In case it doesn't acquire enough legs to make it into U.S. media, I attached the full Zaman piece below, and it didn't, by the way. I watched this one die on the vine. 2 deputies from the main opposition Republican Party, People's Party, the CHP, have claimed that the government is against investigating Turkey's role in sending toxic sarin gas, which is used in an attack on civilians in Syria in 2013, and in which over 1,300 Syrians were killed. CHP deputies Eren Erdem and Ali Şeker held a press conference in Istanbul on Wednesday in which they claimed the investigation into allegations regarding Turkey's involvement in the procurement of sarin gas, which was used in the chemical attack on a civilian population and delivered to the terrorist Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, which is ISIL. The Levant is the L, right? ISIL or ISIS, take your pick. To enable the attack was derailed, meaning that it wasn't going to go any further. Taking the floor first, Erdem stated that the Adana Chief Prosecutor's Office launched an investigation into allegations that sarin was sent to Syria from Turkey via several businessmen. An indictment followed regarding the accusations targeting the government. The MKE, MKE, the Turkish Mechanical and Chemical Industry Corporation, is also an actor that is mentioned in the investigation file. Here's the indictment. All the details about how sarin was procured in Turkey and delivered to the terrorists, along with the audio recordings, are inside the file, Erdem said while waving the file. Erdem also noted that the prosecutor's office conducted detailed technical surveillance and found that an al-Qaeda militant, Hayam Kassab, acquired Sarin, adding, quote, wiretapped phone conversations reveal the process of procuring the gas at specific addresses, as well as the process of procuring the rockets that would fire the capsules containing the toxic gas. However, despite such solid evidence, there has been no arrest in the case. 13 individuals were arrested during the first stage of the investigation, but were later released, refuting government claims that it is fighting terrorism. Unquote. Erdem noted. Over 1,300 people were killed in the sarin gas attack in Ghouta and several other neighborhoods near the Syrian capital of Damascus, with the West quickly blaming the regime of Bashar al-Assad and Russia claiming it was a false flag operation aimed at making U.S. military intervention in Syria possible. They got in mind. Suburbs near Damascus were struck by rockets containing the sarin gas in August 2013. The purpose of the attack was allegedly to provoke a U.S. military operation in Syria which would topple the Assad regime in line with the political agenda of then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his government. JHP's Deputy Sheker spoke after Erdem, pointing out that the government misled the public on the issue by asserting that sarin was provided by Russia. The purpose was to create the perception that, according to Sheker, quote, Assad killed his people with sarin, and that requires a U.S. military intervention in Syria, end quote. In 2013, Mr. Erdogan could not get the Turkish people to back his policy of intervention in Syria. There were daily protests in Taksim Square. In order to shut those down, he started to work on the square. He did not allow any further protests or marches in the square or down Istiklal Boulevard to protest the war. He also changed the nature of and configuration of Taksim Square in order to not allow it to become a political hub in which people would protest publicly again. And he has refused to allow anybody outside of his own people to protest or march in that area ever since. He may be in the process of building a mosque. Once the huge mosque, once he destroys Gezi Park. Gezi Park was the park in which people were being sprayed with gas and were being shot with water cannons in order to get them to leave the whole area. He has been amassing sole power in the country ever since he shut down Taksim Square. And that was 2013. That is at this time. This time that I'm talking about right here. Actually, it was about this time that it was becoming clearer to me that I was going to have to return home. Just because the violence was getting out of control. Sheker also underlined that all the files and evidence from the investigation show a war crime was committed within the borders of the Turkish Republic. And it wouldn't be the only war crime that Mr. Erdogan has done in the pursuit of reestablishing the old Ottoman Empire. That is the objective of the AKP, the AKP, that he is the head of. The investigation clearly indicates that those people who smuggled the chemicals required to procure sarin faced no difficulties, proving that Turkish intelligence was aware of their activities. While these people had to be imprisoned for their illegal acts, not a single person is in jail. Former prime ministers and the interior minister should be held accountable for their negligence in the incident, Sheker further commented. Erdogan also added that he will launch a criminal complaint against those responsible, including those who issued a verdict of non-prosecution in the case, and those who did not prevent the transfer of chemicals, and those who first ordered the arrest of the suspects who were later released. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced in late August that an inquiry had been launched into the gas attacks perpetrated on both Assad's Syrian regime and rebel groups fighting in Syria since the civil war erupted in 2011. However, Erdogan is not the only figure who has accused Turkey of possible involvement in the gas attack. Pulitzer Prize winner and journalist Seymour M. Hersh argued in an article published in 2014 that MIT was involved with the extremist Syrian groups fighting against the Assad regime. There's proof, and I do mean proof, that Turkey was funding and arming these groups. There was a convoy of trucks that were stopped in Adana, right, and I believe it was 2013. Might have been 14, but I think it was 2013 these trucks had arms and money and medicines and a lot of other things that were being sent to ISIS. These were sent by MIT. That is their combination of FBI and CIA. This was announced in all the papers over there. You never heard about it over here because they shut it down. They don't want to tell you what's going on in Turkey. If they really told you what was going on in Turkey, you would be offended. Offended by what our government has been doing. But not only that, you'd be offended at what their government's been doing. And you should be. In his article, Hersh said Assad was not behind the attack as claimed by the U.S. and Europe, but the Turkish-Syrian opposition collaboration was trying to provoke a U.S. intervention in Syria in order to bring down the Assad regime. That's the end of the article. This is common knowledge overseas. You know, it's really funny how we have the mainstream press over here telling lies, blatant lies. And so many of the population will just swallow it. And you should know better. You know that this is the most propagandized country, mainly because of the commercial interests that are trying to make you all into just stupid consumers that buy. You know that. And then you turn around and say that you're not aware that the corporations that own the press don't have an interest? And they're not involved with the government? Oh, they're not involved with the government? Are you out of your bloody mind? Are you out of your bloody mind? Don't you even try to tell me that. That's offensive. I find that very offensive. But the rest of the world sees it. The rest of the world knows. And you, in your ignorance, will continue to stick your head in the sand and pretend to not know. Wake up. Wake up. Consider what I just read and think about it. Then think about the news. I'm not going to tell you what to think about it. And I'm not sure if this was a false flag or not. I need to see a little bit more. But I'm really sure the one 2013 was. I'm very sure of that. And the timing of this one is pretty stinky. I'll have more when I see more. But I think Mr. Paul might be correct. And right now, my feeling is that this was a false flag. That is my feeling. And I'll bet Erdogan's behind it again. He doesn't want us to destroy ISIS. They're his tool. They're his way of breaking down Syria. He's planning to annex parts of Syria. Probably all the Kurdish areas. And I'd say then some too. He's also talking about, and he has spoken about this publicly, he's also talking about annexing parts of Iraq as well. Probably northern Iraq, the areas that are being held by the Kurds and by the ISIS people. And he's also talking about annexing parts of Greece. Where does that go? Do you think he cares about NATO? You want to whine about NATO? Think again, people. Use your head. Don't listen to them without thinking. Start to think a little bit. Because I'm seeing very little of that here in the U.S., and it's really pretty sad. So, until next time.